John was, what was he saying? Hold on a minute while George gets on his Rickenbacker. The Beatles really had their work cut out for them in January of '69 during the Get Back sessions. They had decided to write and record 11 to 14 new songs for a new album, perform those songs live in front of a live audience, and broadcast that as a live TV show, and maybe even make a new film, a new Beatles film. I don't know if that was on the original to-do list, but that seemed to me like it turned into that during the making of. So obviously there was going to be like a lot of drama because when they got to Twickenham, they had no idea what the show was going to look like. They had no idea. They had an idea of when it was going to be. Okay, I think it was the 18th and 19th, 2 shows. Okay, 2 shows, not just 1, but 2. And also these 11 to 14 new songs that they hadn't even written yet. Okay, so there's a lot of drama, a lot of stress, etc. And, one of the stress factors was they had, like I said, they had no idea where this performance was going to be held. Originally, I guess it was supposed to be at the Roundhouse, but I don't know what happened to that. But all of a sudden they're saying, do we do it at Twickenham? Do we do it here? In this stage room? Do we go to a smaller stage? Do we go outside in a park? Or are we going to go to Tripoli? Well, definitely Tripoli wasn't going to work because Ringo didn't want to go. And none of the smaller stages were just too small, etc. They weren't really sure what their audience was going to look like. They all had different wants and needs. But like George always said, some of the best things that happen are never really planned. And this is exactly what happened. The best thing, them being on the roof live, that was the best thing. But it's always kind of bugged me that, the Beatles' wants and needs, what would make them feel good, what would make them feel great performing, it just didn't get a really good hearing. They just didn't get the support that they needed, in my opinion. They had just a couple of ideas that were thrown out in front of them and say, well, it's either this or this. And they were having to make these decisions, etc. So maybe that's how they like to work, but I feel like just added a lot of stress to them. So I've always thought, well, you know what? I think I could come up with something. I mean, of course, I'm sitting here with the luxury of time, but I was listening to what they were talking about during the Get Back sessions. And, they were nostalgic for their old sound, for the old times and the old songs. They kind of wanted to get back to their roots. I think they wanted to do that initially with the White Album, the Beatles album. And it sort of worked out that way. It does have some live sounds to it. I love the White Album. It is my favorite album. But Paul thought that they could do better and really still get back to their roots and perform live. And I think they were all obviously on board with that. They reluctantly maybe, but we're going to do it. We're doing it as a group. So I think I just wish that it could have been more comfortable and more attractive for them rather than just saying, okay, well, I guess this is what we're going to do. So because they were feeling nostalgic and because they were interested in sounding good and they were not interested in traveling, and Ringo was saying, we want to do it to like a UK audience. And George was interested in the sound, as was John. And also safety, I think, was a big deal. They were all a little bit shy about they were all shy about performing live after so long. So I do think Twickenham would have been okay. But my idea for a stage for them would not have been that around the Beatles 69 that they were talking about. I think they were on the right track, though. This around the Beatles situation is a good idea. But have it be nostalgic. Have it be like an updated Cavern, as a backing here. Okay, kind of make it like the Hollywood Bowl and the Cavern. They have that big arched background there, so the Beatles could have stood back up against that. It would have made them feel, it would have satisfied that craving for nostalgia they would have had. Maybe it also would have fed the local UK fans. Maybe, who knows? Everybody would have been on the same page. It would have maybe made the Beatles groove more, or rock more, or play those old songs. It could have turned into like a really big, cool rock and roll show. Who knows? And what I'm talking about here is like a cross between, maybe the Cavern and the Hollywood Bowl. Not make it Just not a replica of the Cavern. No, no, no. But sort of have that vibe to it, but 1969. Just like when John Lennon was talking to Phil Spector, he wanted that echoey sound for Instant Karma. He wanted that wall of sound, like in the 50s, but now. That's what his direction was to Phil Spector. The 50s, but now. And that's what we got. Like that perfect sound for Instant Karma. So that's what I'm thinking, like Cavern 1969. Like an updated look, a little bit more, attractive looking, definitely more open, and it could have been in the round. So they could have had like a round stage, and everybody could have been around it, not all this scaffolding, not all this plastic, none of that nonsense, just regular seating of some kind. So because the audience, who cares? I'm sorry. I don't know why they would always show photos and film of the fans. I mean, that's all great. We love the fans. We're glad they're having a good time, but I want to see the Beatles. Okay. That's what I'm paying my money for. I want more of the Beatles. That's why the fans go. The fans go to see the Beatles. I want to see the Beatles. I don't need to film the audience. I don't need to see any of that. As a fan sitting at home watching this TV show, I don't care. I know that they said, hey, the fans were a big part of who they were back in the day, but this is 1969. People, it's not a big deal. Just like their hair isn't a big deal anymore. The fans screaming, it's not a big deal. Maybe it wouldn't have been a big deal in 1969. Maybe the fans wouldn't have been so nutty. Well, I think I'm fooling myself there. I think the fans would have been crazy. I think they really probably did need that barbed wire entanglement, that George Martin was talking about. But maybe not. Who knows? But if it was, but they would have this kind of a raised round stage. Okay. And then back here could have had that bowl, like the Cavern, as well as the Hollywood Bowl. So it would have been like a nice cross, because the Beatles also liked the Hollywood Bowl. They enjoyed that sound. That worked out good for them. But they could have had not like 180 degrees, it would have been like that, maybe 270, maybe, 220, something like that, 220 degrees. So they could have had a lot of people around us. So not 360, because I think the Beatles needed something backing them to make them feel a little bit more comfortable, like a little bit protected, so that they could kind of take a rest, take a step back. And I also think that this big round stage would have been good, because they could have had Billy Preston here on his organ. They could have had a piano or maybe two pianos going here. They could have had a lot of guitars hanging around, so that it would have encouraged the Beatles to play a lot of different songs. So yeah, I want to hear Get Back, I've Got a Feeling, One After Night 09, Don't Let Me Down. I want to hear all of those songs multiple times. It's absolutely fabulous with me. But if they had had all this ironed out, if they thought of this in the beginning, maybe it would have encouraged the Beatles to put on like a rock show. And they could have played some of those oldies but goldies. Maybe they could have done that Every Little Thing. Maybe they could have rehearsed that. Maybe John could have brought out Help again. Maybe a slowed down Help, because I think that's what John was interested. I want to give the Beatles what they want. John wanted to perform Help. Let him perform Help. If he wanted to do Dig It, fine. Let him do that. If they want to sing like a medley of songs, let them do that. Okay, that would have been just great. A medley of these oldies, like Thinking of Linking, Lost My Little Girl. All those songs they could have done like a little medley. That would have been great. George, I think, probably would have been encouraged to step up to the mic, maybe even two. Can you imagine John and George, on the stage singing You've Really Got a Hold on Me? Oh my God. Okay. Can you imagine that? Like on separate mics or both at the same mic? Oh my God. I would have loved to have seen that. I think that they probably would have done that. Besame mucho. So I think that they would have wanted to do all of those songs. Yes, they would have wanted to play their new songs, but I think in that type of a stage, and I think they would have wanted to make it bigger, do more. Just like, they wanted to do this because they enjoyed their experience they had with performing Hey Jude. They did that live, mostly live, with all the people. But this time the people would have not been allowed on stage. Okay. They would have been made to stay back there, keep them away, because my concern has always been giving the Beatles what they want. And in my opinion, this would have been like to the local audience. Maybe give the people from the Cavern, the original Cavern, their original fans, their Liverpool audience that maybe was feeling neglected or left out or left behind or snubbed maybe, put them up front. Give them special seating. Make them all happy. Put them up front there. That would have been amazing. Okay? It would have made and I think the Beatles would have loved to have seen those faces up there. Would have fed their nostalgia, would have got them back to their roots. Who knows? Maybe they would have, took everything up a notch. Now, I'm not saying they were not all the way hyped up to like 12, 13, 15 or a million up on the rooftop, which I think that they were. But who knows what would have come out extra on a stage, on a setting like that. With this Cavern 69, with this big round stage set up in a way, and the seating all around them, everybody just wanting to see the Beatles. They didn't care about comfort. Who cares? Who cares about the fans? We don't need cameras on them, okay? We just needed cameras on the Beatles. And I think that they maybe give Ringo a song. But maybe they would have sung a few songs from the White Album. Maybe. Can you imagine Gently Weeps live? Wow. Performed by the Beatles. Now, I don't think they would have gotten Eric Clapton on. I do not think so. I really don't think that would have been good. I love seeing Billy Preston up there. So we could have had Let It Be live. You've got Paul over here on the piano. You've got John on bass. You got Ringo on the drums, Billy on the organ over here, and George on the guitar. Oh my God. And then two of us live. They could have done all of that in front of the audience. Fast songs, slow songs, none of it matters. Okay. The audience, they all just want to see the Beatles. They just want to have that experience. And I think that's what it was like in the late 60s. It was just the experience. Yes, just seeing them. I think that the Beatles said, yeah, they don't really come to hear us. They just want to see us. I'm sorry, the Beatles, they would have heard you really well because I know that Glenn Johns and George Martin working together would have come up with a great sound system. But they needed to come up with a stage like this. And this is just my opinion. I mean, maybe they could even have performed Maxwell's Silver Hammer then. Who knows? It would have been fun. They could have had the anvil on the stage. They could have handed out all kind of instruments to the audience. Who knows? It would have been a thing. It would have been a happening in the 60s. This is just me because I always get a little bit frustrated whenever I see Get Back and I see the Beatles basically almost like being ignored. Their wants and needs being ignored. They are a little afraid about performing. They want to perform. So you've got these Beatles in 1969, pretty much at the height of their popularity, at their peak of their genius, in my opinion, after the White Album. And here they are wanting to perform live, write new songs, okay? And everybody's kind of sitting around twiddling their thumbs saying, well, who knows? Oh my, it's like, well, what about this? Oh, it just cheeses me off every time. It really, really does. But if I'd been there, this would have been my idea. They could have morphed it into whatever they wanted to do. Who knows? Maybe they could have added colored lights. I don't know. Maybe that would have made them happy because those colored lights were pretty cool. And I also think maybe they would have played for longer than a half an hour. I think it would have encouraged them to go like a full hour playing all these songs. They would have been loving it so much. I think after 30 minutes, they would not even know time would have gone by. Okay. I would have kept going. No, keep going. It's only been 20 minutes. No, it's only been 25 minutes. Keep on going. That would have been me sitting off over here on the side. I go, no, keep going. You still got plenty of time. Still do this and still do that. And playing the songs twice, 2 or 3 times to make sure it's recorded properly. Oh my God. Yeah, I don't mind listening to those songs performed live 2 or 3 or 4 times. I'm down with that because I'm just like all those fans. I just want to see the Beatles. That's all we care about, just seeing the Beatles performing live. And I just have that picture in my mind's eye. I always had that picture in my eye of them performing on that round stage with kind of a Cavern 69 in the back, them all happy, performing, and them being nostalgic, maybe even acting a little bit punky on stage, maybe having more loose banter Okay, more getting back to their punk days, their leather days. Can you imagine? What if they put on the leathers back then? I really don't want that. But I would love the attitude of the Beatles in their leathers, just loose on stage. Mac Shaw on stage, and they were almost even talking about that when they first get over to the Apple basement. They were talking about Mac Shaw. Give the Beatles let them do their Mac show. Let them do their oldies. Give them all kinds of support. Make it easy on them to perform. Give them a good sound. Let Paul play his Hofner. Let George bring as many guitars on stage. Put 2 or 3 pianos on that big old circular stage. Let Billy over here, give him a couple, 2 or 3 organs here. Let John do whatever the hell he wants, okay? And Ringo, make sure he's good to go. Make sure those tea towels are in place. Give him plenty of space. Let everybody see what Ringo's doing. Okay, make sure he's good. And give those Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo too, if he wants to get up on that big round stage so that they can move around all over the place. Very similar to what they did with the Washington, D.C. concert. So you see, I'm going a little bit big with all these ideas. These are just my mind's eye, what I think would have been pretty great to see. Maybe this could have been what their live show could have looked like. Again, I just wanted to give the Beatles what they want to do. Because once they get on stage, they are that great little group. Because you saw them on the rooftop. They were all gung-ho. They really got into their groove. And they could have just played for maybe a couple of hours. I don't know. And I'm sure I'm not the only one with these kinds of ideas. I bet other people would have had much better ideas than this. But I just wanted to talk about mine for a little while because, like I said, it just kind of cheeses me off to see the Beatles, and their wants and needs, their talents, like not wasted, but just kind of not as elevated and supported as maybe what it could have been. So thanks so much for being here with me again today. I really appreciate it. And until next time, peace and love one another. Take care. And what else were they singing there? They were doing a lot of spoofs on Obla Di, Obla Da. They could have played that song. Maybe thrown in I'm Only Sleeping. I'm I'm only sleeping, but I'm so tired. I'm only sleeping. Yeah, they probably could have done, I would have loved to have heard that live. I think that they could have done that. I know I misspoke there a little bit, but that's actually one of my favorite songs is I'm Only Sleeping. But I'd go for I'm So Tired, but I'm Only Sleeping. That's a fave.